Mark Hill of Clinton News Network, better known as CNN, this week was dropped as a pundit by the cable news network after he made comments about boycotting Israel. That is a big step and a big change for the media, for someone to step out like that. And was calling for a free Palestine from the river to the sea, which, for those of you who don't know, I suspect it goes back to the 1967 borders. Although the Anti-Defamation League and the National Council of Young Israel both condemned his comments. No surprise there. Hill defended his stance and took to Twitter saying, "At no point did I endorse, support or even mention Hamas," which is what was used against. And Mark Lamont Hill has had his contract with Clinton News Network cancelled. And he also denied saying he used the river to the sea comment during the speech, although conservatives and pro-Israel figures blasted him for referencing a phrase often used by anti-Israel terror groups. Hill claimed on Twitter the phrase precedes Hamas by more than 50 years and also has a variety of meanings. And he tweeted his intention was to highlight that 20% of Palestinians living in Israel are systematically denied access to equal rights, and also dismissed the angry and often vitriolic responses he was receiving from Zionist groups. That's what happens when you they call it the free speech, but it appears not. It's only free speech with limitations. Much for those who want to really say free speech anyway. Where am I next? We have warned about this in previous shows, and it's this article comes as no surprise to me. And the popular spit-in-a-tube genetic testing companies like Ancestry.com and 23andMe can and frequently do sell your data to drug makers. Oh my. But on Wednesday, one of those partnerships became much more explicit when the pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline announced it was acquiring a $300 million stake in 23andMe. As part of a 4-year deal between the two companies, GlaxoSmithKline will comb 23andMe's genetic data to look for new drugs to develop, also referred to as drug targets. Read between the lines. We'll also use the genetic data to inform how patients are selected for clinical trials. And if that news has you thinking about how your own genetic material is being used for research, know that though the DNA you submit to these services is ostensibly kept private, but leaks do happen, as we all know, and deliberate leaks in my opinion. Anyway, privacy advocates say that such incidents could allow your data to find its way elsewhere, perhaps without your knowledge. Like I said, I did warn about them. The concern I had is there appears to be only one genetic DNA testing facility throughout the whole of North America, and that's right next to Dugway, Area 52. That's what bothered me more than most, is who was using it, who was getting it, and what were they doing with it. We've been genetically interfered over a long period of time. We don't have to add to it. We're having a discussion today about life longevity, and Shane mentioned it in his recent interview. Those who lived on a 3D zone, not necessarily planet, zone, used to live 900 to 1500 years, not 70 to 80. And the reason being, imagine if we doubled our lifespan and we lived to 150. We would have worked out their plans a long time ago. They have certain plans that repeat every 70 years. Like I said, the Nazis, 1940 and 2010. Well, at that point, many have passed on, or they're too young, or they're too old, or just don't care. So these genetic people never do anything for our benefit and never have, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, because the genetics, even the genetics that the heirs tried to try and cut out, the black voodoo that was prevalent on this planet a long time ago and has been for a long time, it went wrong. And I wouldn't, whilst it may be fun finding out who your ancestors are, I think the risks are far too high. The Taliban has carried out an attack in Afghanistan this week, whoever the Taliban may be, on the base of the British security firm G4S. Oh my. A British man was among 5 employees killed when gunmen stormed their compound. Of course, G4S is one of these Blackwater type security groups. Security is a bit of a misnomer. And they help, according to them anyway, help guard the area around the British embassy in Kabul. The US-led invasion of Afghanistan in 2001 contributed to a boom in the private security business. And in recent years, the presence of contractors has decreased, mirroring the withdrawal of foreign troops. However, insecurity in Afghanistan remains widespread, and there are still thousands of NATO troops, and the demand for armed security of foreign embassies, military bases and NGOs is still quite high. So there's still a presence of foreign security companies working in Afghanistan today. G4S, for example, say they have about 1,200 members in Afghanistan and have been in that country since 2003. Half the workforce is Afghan and the other half is made up of foreign nationals, including British people. Aside from providing security at the British Embassy, the company has other private security contracts for NGOs and corporate clients. The company trains and employs security guards and is involved in the training and mentoring of Afghan national forces. Also, they say. Are you telling me, given, let's just take G4S for example, it takes 15 years to train soldiers? If that's the case, why have so many of the American youth remember the song 19? Did they start training them when they were 4? It's all bullshit. The American military, or should I say the US military, Inc., that are there since 2001. And it takes 15 years, 17 years, where the US is concerned, to train people as soldiers. I think no. They're just swinging their lead because they're frightened of bringing them home, is the real answer. Following the directed energy weapon attack by the SSP in California, of course the Portal people That is the mainstream media for those who are new listening to this show. The Portal people and the Weather Channel people were all stating that the missing was anything ranging from 1,200 to 3,000. Well, a new report has come out this week, and the number of people missing is 25. Where did they get 1,200 or 3,000 from? Now, this was also put out by the Butte County Sheriff, who had put the number of missing down to 49 on Friday, and it was 500 a week ago. Now, the number of dead has stood unchanged at 88, and the campfire which devastated the town of Paradise, we'll have more on that later, northeast of San Francisco last month, and workers have been combing through the debris of more than 18,000 destroyed homes. We'll have more on that later. Those of you with semi-long memories will remember, I think it was October the 18th show or 19th, somewhere around there, where we put out in the intel that the Crown Prince, Saudi Crown Prince, was responsible in some way for killing the Saudi journalist, Mr. Khashoggi. And the CIA seemed to agree with that, and the government, who don't know which way to go at the moment, are frightened of committing. Well, the head of the CIA will now brief Congress on it, on the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi murder. And Gina Haspel is to talk to Senate leaders this week, and as she was absent from last week's briefing on the Secretaries of State and Defence, which kind of angered some in Congress. But there's a lot of faction games going on at the moment. It's fairly thick and heavy as the panic not only sets in DC, but many other places. Now, Mr. Khashoggi was killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in October, and the US media have reported that the CIA had concluded Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman probably ordered the killing, which is slightly different to which he did. And the Saudis have charged 11 people but deny that the Crown Prince was involved. And US media reports say that the CIA has evidence he exchanged messages with Saud al-Qahtani, who allegedly oversaw the murder. Now, the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Defence Secretary James Mattis had told senators last week there was no direct evidence of the Crown Prince's involvement. And Mr. Trump has said that the CIA findings on the Crown Prince were not conclusive. But on November the 20th, he said it could very well be that the Crown Prince had knowledge of this tragic event. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. It seems they're frightened to commit, some people. Won't always be the case. Complaints going on in the UK about greater powers given to HMRC, which is to tackle tax avoidance and evasion, are undermining the rule of law and justice, warns a House of Lords report this week. And the Economic Affairs Committee said HMRC has been granted some broad, disproportionate powers without effective taxpayer safeguards. They were imposing high penalties designed to deter taxpayers from appealing, and it is stated that they are a tax on justice, and the committee claimed it has demanded a review of the oversight of HMRC and its powers. A bit like what's going on with the IRS. Lord Forsyth of Drumlane, chairman of the committee, said HMRC is right to tackle tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. However, a careful balance must be struck between clamping down and treating taxpayers fairly. And our evidence has convinced us that this balance has tipped too far in favour of the HMRC and against the fundamental protections of every taxpayer is or should expect. Now, the committee's report warned that some of the powers, as per usual, disproportionately affect unrepresented and lower income taxpayers. It's only the lower income taxpayers that actually pay the tax, and the lower middle. One day people will work that out. People power. So many think we don't have it, but we do. And here's another example. Smart meter installations have had their steepest drop yet over the past 3 months, according to official data, amid suggestions that homeowners are refusing to have them installed. The number of smart meters being installed in homes declined by 10% over the past quarter, after falling continuously for the past 9 months. And this is according to data of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Industry sources said this was because households are refusing smart meters over fears they may effectively trap them in overpriced energy deals, as they will lose their smart function if they switch. They also said technical difficulties and a short supply of new style meters were factors behind the fall. They won't tell us the real reason, as people have worked it out that they're dangerous, that's why. And Peter Earle, the head of energy, said after all the flack about issues surrounding smart meters, a 10% drop in installations over the last quarter is another massive headwind for the rollout programme. It sure is. I expect that to increase as more and more people gain a bit of courage and fight back. Foreign and domestic trade has been going down rapidly. And yes, it's all blamed on Trump and the tariffs. It's bullshit. Tariffs are to do with the dragon groups and nothing to do with countries. But the reality is the global conglomerate companies are all collapsing due to having nowhere to steal funds from anymore. That's the reality. And when you add in the new banking restrictions and protocols and clearance done by Kim, and the world economy, which was all contained by a very few companies, has started to collapse into the dust. There is a solution, but one that doesn't satisfy the global control freak psychopaths. It will get far worse before it gets better. The economy will tank and the world will go into a full global depression unless we remove the obstacles at the top and the deep states, not state, ensconced in all the major countries of the world. Now, the foreign trade in November, according to each market, last year the emerging markets was operating at 15.2%. Currently, it's now 9.7%. In the advanced economies, it was 7.2%. It's now 5.3%. In Asia, it was 14.9%. It's now 10.3%. In Europe, it was 4.4%. It's now 2.1%. North America was 9.9%. It's now 7.4%. And Latin America was 12.3%. And they've gone down to 12.2%. That's the trends. It's going down. Record imports in October drove the US trade deficit to the highest level in a decade. The Commerce Department said Thursday that the gap between what the United States sells and what it buys from foreign countries hit 55.5 billion in October, and the fifth straight increase and highest since October 2008. Now, the politically sensitive deficit in the trade of goods with China also rose 7.1% to a record 43.1 billion. The goods gap with the European Union widened 65.5% to a record 17.6 billion, which is led by shipments of medicine and also cars. Overall imports rose 0.2% to a record 266.5 billion, and exports fell 0.1% to 211 billion. Mr. Trump campaigned on a pledge to slash America's long-standing trade deficit with the rest of the world, and despite his import taxes on steel, aluminum and Chinese goods, the deficit so far this year is running at 11.4%, above the January-October 2017 rates. US exports of soybeans targeted for retaliatory tariffs by China dropped by 46.8% in October. The economies are all collapsing. I'm not going to mince words. I'm not one of the portal people. I don't have to lie. It's tanking, literally. Yes, some of the markets can be a gauge. Not really, because they're all largely faked anyway, as we all know. But there is a solution. The solution's sitting there on the table in every country. It requires some courage, a set of balls. That's all it takes. The old order was designed to fail. Has Kim and the team helped with some of that? A little. But it was a harvesting program. The whole thing was being harvested, including the clowns. And if you think you're going to back your way out of it, you're wrong. The solution's on the table. The world's largest futures exchange, the CME Group, had to repeatedly halt trading in US stock futures for brief periods this morning because of violent price moves in an unusual, it's not unusual, trust me, intervention that has stunned traders. US stock market futures reopened this morning in Asia after an unscheduled closure to mark the funeral of the former President George Herbert Walker Bush on Wednesday, 4 years too late. And Tuesday's trade saw Wall Street selling off heavily, with the key indices down 3% and the Dow 800 points. And here's the kicker. When the futures reopened in the Asian trading on Thursday, stock futures plunged again, falling up to 1.9%, although they did recover and were down just 1%. But the CME announced this morning that it intervened to prevent steeper falls in US equity futures. And a note from an institutional clearing desk in Sydney sent to traders and seen by the Business Insider, CME experienced multiple velocity logic events from the open in equity futures today, and it caused, this is the key, several 10-second pauses where limit orders were accepted but market IOC orders were rejected, causing multiple algorithm slices to get rejected. Now, the pauses allow participants to enter the market, preventing even harder moves. So they were pausing. Here's an admittance of what I've already told you in this show. these markets are rigged. They have a 4 to 7 second lag, which may not seem much, but it is to them. Today, they've admitted they were using 10-second pauses. So in other words, they manipulate the price and then allow other marketeers to come in. That's your stock market for you.